What if you could have fresh vegetables ready to use in seconds? No chopping, no peeling, no rushing to use them before they spoil in the fridge. Today I'm freeze drying a variety of vegetables that'll stay fresh for 10 to 25 years depending on how you package them, and we'll get to that in a minute. But then as soon as we want to use them, it takes 2 to 3 minutes and they're ready to eat. And my main goal for what I want to do here is I want to have a jar full of vegetables that I can pour into a soup or a stew and have a vegetable heavy soup in a matter of minutes. So that means the vegetables we're using today are going to be mainly for soups. We've got some onions here, we've got a whole bunch of carrots, we have some celery. I'm not a huge fan of celery, but for some reason when it's in a soup, I absolutely love this stuff. And then my wife wanted to make sure that I got some corn to put in there as well. I've already rinsed these carrots, but the next thing I want to do is just get these ends cut off and get them peeled. So let's go ahead and get that going. And these carrots are gonna make great snacks for either the dogs or the chicken, so I'm just gonna kind of set them off to the side here. And then once we have our carrots peeled, we just want to cut them into strips. And then keep cutting them into strips. I wanna make these just nice little, small little pieces of carrots. I don't want anything big. I want these all to be just diced up vegetables. If you do wanna go bigger, there's no problem with going bigger. They're still gonna freeze dry really well. You might run into issues with rehydration. Depending on how big the vegetables are, I've had issues with bigger chunks of carrots don't necessarily rehydrate very well, or just take longer to rehydrate. All right, the carrots are chopped up. They aren't too small, but they're just kind of a little medium size there. Let's move on to, let's do the celery. So the celery, all I'm gonna do here is chop off the bottom. That's gonna go to the chickens. And then, so is that broken piece right there? These, I'm just gonna cut them pretty thin as I go, but I'm not gonna cut them in half or anything. I'm just gonna cut them just thin as I go down. Even with how big these are, they're still gonna rehydrate pretty well. Let's see if I can show you that there. So, pretty decent size. We're not gonna cut them any smaller than that. I lied, I'm sorry. There were some of those that I did end up cutting in half as I was cutting them because those were the biggest celery stalks I've ever seen in my life. I don't know why I can't grow them that big, but they were huge. My chickens don't really like onions, but we're gonna try it anyways. Typically, my wife is the one that does the cooking and chopping and all that type of stuff around here. So onions aren't something that I'm gonna be very good at chopping up. I've seen people cut their onions, but just not all the way down. We're gonna try this. And now I think I see people, I think I did it wrong. Maybe. So now I've got it all cut up the different ways. I did it right. I did it. I'm a professional. I'm a professional chef. I was just kidding the whole time. I definitely know what I'm doing. I'm not crying, you're crying. Okay, onions chopped like a professional. The only other one we have is corn. The corn is in a can. I live somewhere that has winter and we don't have any fresh corn around here. I couldn't even find any at the store. So this is the kind of corn that we're getting. All right, the next thing we need to do is we need to blanch all of these different vegetables. And the thing that blanching is gonna do is it's gonna help with the color of all of these different vegetables. It's gonna help with the freshness, the flavor. It's gonna kind of lock it all in. I've done this a lot of times both ways. And I honestly have a whole thing of carrots sitting in my pantry that I'm kind of setting off to the side until they're my last ones because I didn't blanch them and now they're like, they just look dull and I know they're not gonna taste as good. So ever since we've kind of figured that out, we blanch our vegetables every time we freeze dry them. So if you've got the time, blanch them. It's gonna help quite a bit. It takes an extra 5-10 minutes, but it's worth it. I'm gonna start with the celery and we're gonna put it in for about 3 minutes. You want a rolling boil, toss it in for 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever. I like to stick with 3. 3 seems to be pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and just let those sit in there for a minute, and then as soon as they're done, I'm gonna scoop them out, put them into here, and then put in the next one. So I'll repeat that for all 3 of these. I'm not gonna do the corn. The corn it's canned corn. It's like pre-cooked. All right, there we go, 3 minutes on the celery. I'm just gonna come over here and scoop it out and get it into this bowl here. The celery is nice and green, it's blanched, it looks really good, and at this point, to make it more efficient, I'm keeping the same water in there. I might see kind of a mixture of flavors and colors, especially when I get to the onions. I'll probably do the onions next. They might be just a little bit green. That doesn't bother me. If it does bother you, then I would switch out the water every time you do this or use multiple pots. But we're gonna go ahead and get going on the onions and get these in the water. The onions, I'm gonna do a little bit less time because they're more thin, kind of just more fragile. So I'm probably only gonna throw those in there for about a minute and then pull them out and switch over to the carrots. And as far as the flavors go, for me, it doesn't matter because I'm putting these all into a soup together anyway, so if the flavors mix up a little bit, it's totally fine. If you do want a separation of those flavors and you're gonna be maybe storing these separate and not in the same jar, or you're gonna use them for different purposes, I would definitely switch out that blanch water in between. All right, it's been about a minute and a half, 2 minutes here. Let's go ahead and get these onions out. All right, time to get the carrots in. The carrots, I am gonna do the full 3 minutes because I really want the carrots to not necessarily cook, but just soften up maybe just a little bit. We are using a medium harvest stripe. To me, the size it's plenty big for us, at least unless we're in the harvest season. In the harvest season, it's a little bit small, but for general purposes, medium is just fine for us. So we've got 3 trays here. That's what we're gonna do today. And then we're also gonna use some parchment paper for this one. You can also use silicone mats or anything like that. This parchment paper is pre-cut, so it's really easy to use. We got it from freeze-drying-supplies.com. I'm sure you've seen some of Brian's videos on freeze drying. He sells these pre-cut to whatever size freeze dryer you have. It's definitely convenient. I've got a link in the description for that if you're interested. 3 minutes is up. Let's go ahead and get these carrots out. Like I said earlier, when you blanch these, it really does bring out some of that, especially with these carrots, some of that color. It's really nice. And now to get these loaded up, it's really easy. There's no method to my madness here. It's just try to get these as evenly as we can onto these 3 trays. So let's go ahead and start with the carrots. And it does help if you just kind of strain as much of the water out as possible. Maybe run it through a strainer. I think we might have 1 full tray of carrots here. And then we can put the onions with the celery and the corn on its own. I think that's what we're gonna do. Let's throw the celery on and see where that puts us. When we put 2 different things on the same tray, it's totally fine. We will kind of try to separate it as much as we can. So we'll kind of scoot these over to one side, and then when we put the onions on, we'll put them on this side and just kind of try to have a little bit of separation there. We'll do onions now. And the last thing we have is going to be the corn. The corn's easy. I'll just pour it out onto it. So for this, we'll give it probably about 2 cans, I think. Let's see what that gives us. Let's spread it out a little bit. I think 2 cans will be good. I'm gonna use these trays. I got these trays from Brian as well, so from freeze-drying-supplies.com. I'll just have a link for his website in the description below. It is an affiliate link, so if you do buy something, it definitely helps us out, so I appreciate it. But with these, you just put the lid on, and you can stack them up, and it helps a lot with getting things to be able to fit in your freezer. Now, freezing it isn't a must. It isn't something you have to do, but it does help. It helps quite a bit to shorten the freeze drying cycle. So the first cycle of a freeze dryer, the very first thing that it does is it freezes your food really cold. And if your food is already cold when you put it in, it takes a lot less time to do that. So like right now we have something inside our freeze dryer running. So while that's running, I can put this stuff in the freezer and get it pre-frozen before it goes into the freeze dryer. It's gonna cut quite a few hours of freeze time off of your freeze dryer. So if you're doing back-to-back runs and you're trying to get as much as you can out of your freeze dryer, that's a really good way to go, is while you have something running inside of your freeze dryer, get your next run in the freezer ready to go, and you're gonna speed that process up quite a bit. All right, we are ready to put our vegetables into the freeze dryer. The only setting we change is the extra dry time is the one that we change, because if we aren't home when it gets done, we like to have that extra time. We had 24 hours because that's the max that you can go. We don't really ever use the entire 24 hours, but we like to have that there just in case to give us that little bit of a buffer zone. Get our veggies in here. We've got our corn. We've got our celery and onions, and we've got our carrots. All right, let's run out there where it's not quite so loud. While we're waiting for the veggies to freeze dry, just a couple quick things. If you are interested in a freeze dryer or buying a freeze dryer, we have a link in our description. If you click on that link and buy one from that link, we get a commission from that, and that directly helps us make more of these videos. We also have links for everything we use today, from the tray lids to the liners. Everything we're using today, we have links for down in the description. So if you use those, it really helps us out, and I appreciate it. Now, these veggies are probably gonna run for roughly 36 hours or so we're gonna come back when they're done, but I do typically give it some extra dry time just because I would rather be more dry than not dry enough. So we'll come back when those are done. Okay, the veggies are done. They were probably done 6 or 7 hours ago, but that was the middle of the night, so I wasn't about to pull them out. They've been going for 44 hours now, which that's kind of a long run. Typically I'd pull it out earlier, but it was pretty late. So let's go ahead, and I've got another thing in here. So what I do in this situation is I'm just gonna go ahead and release the air. And this is also how, like, if I'm doing the weighing the tray method to see if it's dry, this is exactly what I do. I release the valve and it lets all the air back into the machine. And then you can open the machine. You can pull everything out. And if I was doing the weighing method, I would be weighing these and then seeing if they're losing any weight. If you want to know more about that, let me know and I can maybe do a whole video on that. But right now I'm just going to pull these out. Leave the other 2 trays in there. Close this back up. Close the valve again and bring it back into the kitchen. I'll get these out here in just a minute. All right, we've got everything dried. Now, how are we gonna store it? There's a couple different ways you can store it, but today I'm gonna be using glass jars. So the difference between glass jars, and these are just jars that we had sitting in our pantry, and then we sterilize them in the oven before we do this. The other way you could do this is you could use Mylar bags like these ones right here, and the difference is gonna be pretty big. You've got up to a 25-year shelf life with the Mylar bags, and you've got maybe a 5-10 year max shelf life with your glass jars. I like to use the glass jars just because they're reusable. We're gonna be using it well within that 5-year range. These will probably be gone and used before the winter's over. Before the spring's over, at least. And another tool that we use to make our lives easy for this process is this funnel right here. It is obnoxiously big, but it helps out quite a bit. So I'm gonna set these over here. Now, some people in my family like different vegetables more than others. So on this one, like, I'm doing less corn, more carrots, a little bit more celery. So I can kind of adjust the ratios a little bit depending on who's gonna be using this at any given time. My wife and one of my kids really like onions, so this one got a little bit more onions than the other ones are gonna get. And while we're on the subject of onions, this is reminding me because I was smelling the onions. If you've never done freeze-dried caramelized onions, highly recommend it. Maybe we'll do a video about that one, but we did it when we had a lot of onions from our garden this season, and we caramelized a whole bunch of them and then freeze-dried that, and we made a freeze-dried powder out of it, like a freeze-dried caramelized onion powder, as well as just keeping the freeze-dried onions whole in their little slices, is that what we call them? Slices. Let's go ahead and get this out of the way, get all these sealed up. Let me grab some oxygen absorbers. With oxygen absorbers, I don't know if you've dealt with these or not yet, but if you have, then as soon as you open the package that they come in, you can't reuse those unless you get them sealed up. As soon as they're exposed to the oxygen, they start to kind of die off, and you've got a little circle meter in there, and it tells you if they're good or bad. So if it turns like a dark bluish purple color, those oxygen absorbers are no longer good. If it stays pink, you're good to go. So what we do is we have this tiny little jar here. It's just like a little jelly jar that we put all of our oxygen absorbers in as soon as we open up the package. So we open up a brand new vacuum sealed package, and then we pull out what we need and then put the rest in here. So like right now, so I need 4, so I'm gonna pull 4 out of here. And the little identifier is still pink. Pull 4 out, put the identifier back in, put the lid back on as quickly as I can, and close it up. Now, I need to get these in here. I'm also gonna vacuum seal these, and that's just kind of like a double safety there. And since I can only vacuum seal one at a time, I'm gonna put the rings on right now, just to close these and stop more oxygen from coming in. Let me go ahead and get all these vacuum sealed, and I will be right back. Everything is vacuum sealed. Everything has oxygen absorbers in it, except for this one. Everything's done. So now we have 4 full meals that we can just dump veggies into. For me, this is gonna be especially big with like ramen and soups and different things like that. I would imagine my wife is gonna have some other crazy idea for it, but I'm definitely the simple one. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this into some ramen. It's a new day, and I've got some ramen. This is just basic bare bones ramen. There's nothing special about this, but I want to show you just kind of how you can use it. I purposely put extra broth in here. I only wanted to make 1 package. If I was making 2 packages, this would have been great for this size of jar, but just for the purposes of showing you how easily you can rehydrate this, I added some extra broth in here. So we go ahead and open it up. I didn't put an oxygen absorber this one, if you remember, because I knew I was using it really soon. So I pour it in. Give it a little mix. So what we'll do is we'll let this sit for, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes tops. It really doesn't have to sit long. All of this is gonna rehydrate extremely quickly. All right, it was sitting for about 2 minutes is all, but it's looking like it's pretty well rehydrated. So let's go ahead and give some of this a try. Let's get some of that celery in there. So we got a little bit of everything. Looks hot though. Let's try it out. Perfect. Let's try the pasta. This is a perfect way to make a boring meal just a little less boring.